Greetings, Ventures. This is Lauren, your Guild Advisor, and welcome back to my cut content and episode review series with DanMachi Season 2. Now, before I dive into Episode 3, there is one small thing I want to comment on my previous video for Episode 2. It is I said that mortals cannot kill gods, but that was my slight misinterpretation of the light novel text. It's more of a taboo that mortals cannot kill gods. Like, if this is something that you do, everyone will look down upon you and you'll never live that down. So rather than it being like a literal law, like this is something that mortals can't do, it's something that mortals shouldn't do and absolutely should not do. And that's why it's like only deities can kill deities, because only deities should have that right. And that's how that law goes. But anyway, let's dive back into Episode 3. Now, with the start of this episode, we're finally getting that Soma Familia stuff that was skipped on earlier in the past episodes. Like the very beginning of the episode, we get a small original scene of a lot of people lined up outside of Soma Familia begging for that wine that just really is there to illustrate that the wine is very addictive and people are just lining up at the door because Soma's wine is so powerful. And this is where we get some of the prologue from Volume 6 that was skipped in the earlier episodes. This is when Lily initially asked Soma to let her lead the Familia and join Hestia Familia. Like, this happened in the beginning pages of Volume 6. Lily already intends to join Hestia Familia, as you can tell by the very end of this episode, with everyone joining Hestia Familia and becoming a part of it. But since the very beginning of this light novel, Lily has been intending to join Hestia Familia from the start. And this is actually when Xanis realizes that Lily is alive, during the opening prologue to Volume 6. And one cool thing I like to note is that we finally hear Soma's voice actor, and it sounds a lot like Koki Uchiyama, who voices Shigaraki in My Hero Academia, Kanye from Amagi Brilliant Park, and also my boy Tsukishima from Haikyuu. So he's a very notable voice actor, and I'm pretty sure that's his voice because I've heard it in a lot of other animes. I'm pretty sure he's the one that voices Soma, and I think he does a good job of voicing Soma, the character that's very detached from his familia, as you can see illustrated in the beginning scene of this episode. And then after they play the opening song, we go back to a scene with Xanis talking to Lily in one of the cells in Soma Familia, and then basically flashbacking to the scene that happened in the previous episode when Lily confronts Xanis during the Apollo raid on Hestia Familia. And it's there, it's revealed what happens between the two. Like, that was something they skipped in the previous episode, and like I thought, they brought everything together for this one episode so we would tie a bit well. But I do like the foreshadowing that happens in the light novel a bit more, but that's my opinion. But I think that flows a bit better than what they tried to do here, just squeezing all the Soma Familia stuff into one episode. And it's in this scene that we're introduced to the dwarf Chandra, as you can see later in the episode, who just lets Lily go. They tried to build up the animosity between Xanis and Chandra here in the anime just by Chandra just grunting at him. But there's actually some dialogue exchange between Xanis and Chandra, which makes it obvious that the dwarf does not like Xanis at all, and that provides a bit more context as to why he would just free Lily despite that technically being against the orders of his Familia commander. And another original scene they have here in the anime is that commentary between Chloe and Anya from the pub, and also Seer worrying about Belle. Seer believes that Belle will not run away from the war game, that he will fight, and she just has that faith in him. And I do think it's a nice scene to add into the anime, because originally in the light novel, it was just basically saying that the town of Araria was excited for the upcoming war game, and here you just see the details of that excitement come through Anya and Chloe. And the thing I liked the most that the anime did in this episode was make an original scene where Hestia and crew are planning out their attack on Soma Familia. Like, this didn't happen in the light novel, it was alluded to. Like, originally in the light novel, Hestia got the location of where Lily was from Hermes right after the Dentists, where they decide on the war game rules. But right here you can see that they're already preparing for an attack on Soma Familia, and that's what Hestia is doing while she's stalling for time so Belle can get as much training as he can before the war game starts. And one funny thing the anime does when Hestia finally comes to that meeting of the gods, Dentists, is she says the line, "Kept you waiting, huh?" And that's like a funny reference to Metal Gear Solid. So, and I saw that being posted around Twitter as well. Like, I thought that was really funny. I'm like, is that really a line from this show? And it was. So that brought a smile to my face. Here, as they're deciding the rules for the Dentists, it's really clarified that Apollo is just very arrogant. Like, he does not consider that Hestia could win at all, because it is currently his whole familia of like more than 100 members against Hestia Familia, which is currently just Bell. He doesn't have a single doubt in the world that his familia will win. So his condition, if he were to lose, is for Hestia to be able to do whatever she wants, and that might just come back to bite him. And as they're negotiating for outside help, Freya is the one that really turns the tide and gets that support that Hestia needs to allow outside help. And the one important thing about that is that Loki mentions to Hestia at her previous Danatis that she knows that Freya has an interest in Bell, and that really doesn't come to Hestia's mind until like this moment in the light novel, like, why is Freya helping me so much? Maybe what Loki said is true, and that just is something to keep in your mind as the series goes on. Like, Hestia is now a bit more suspicious about Freya. And one of the things in the light novels that Apollo was worried about was he knows that Hephaestus is an ally of Hestia, and Hephaestus Familia is a lot stronger than Apollo, because Apollo's strongest adventurer is Hyacinthus, who is level 3, and if you've seen Sword of Retoria, you know that the captain of Hephaestus Familia is Subaki, who was level 5. So if Hephaestus was really allowed to help Hestia in that regard, Apollo would be in a pickle. But thankfully, Hermes was able to get that negotiation down and get that one outside helper from outside of Varario. Like, the condition was for that person to be from a familia outside of Varario, and I'll, of course, get back to that a bit later in the video. And then cutting back to Xanis talking to Lily in the cell. In the light novel, Lily's actually bound her hands behind her back and her stomach's on the floor. That's not too important of a detail, but it does show the cruelty of Xanis in that regard. But during this conversation, the one thing that made me mad in the anime is that he's mentioning his plan to use Lily's magic to make profit of some sort, and he's cut off by the warning bell in the anime before he can tell what that plan is. And in the light novel, he actually does get all those words out. Like, his plan is to use Lily's magic to disguise herself as a monster to lure other monsters out so his other familia members can capture them and sell them on the black market. And this is one of the things that makes me mad about how the anime is adapting things. Like, they did this with episode 1 with them omitting the conversation between Belle and Hermes, where Hermes discussed the 3 great quests and also some background behind Zeus and Hera Familia. And that's one of my favorite things about DanMachi, is like the world building and foreshadowing that goes on in the series and it coming back later. Because it really seems like they're cutting a lot of details in Volume 6 to cover it in just 4 episodes. And that's kind of worrisome, because originally we thought that because all the scenes we saw in the promotional videos before were from Volume 6 and Volume 7, and then even at a panel at Anime Expo they mentioned they would be adapting Volume 6 and 7. But at this current pacing, it looks like they might actually be going into content beyond that, because if Volume 6 is only 4 episodes, Volume 7 couldn't be any more than 6 if it's going at this pace, and it leaves 2 more episodes to do, and I'll discuss what that might be later. And then in the light novel, after Xanis leaves the area, like, this is something I mentioned earlier in the previous video, is Lily using her transformation magic, and we don't see her use it too much in the anime when she was supposed to be disguised as a werewolf in episode 2. And then in this episode, she uses her magic to change her hands into werewolf claws to get out of her bindings, and of course, that's when the dwarf frees her. And there's a little bit of background for Chandra the Dwarf. Like, he originally joined Soma Familia because he heard about this great wine, but as he stayed in the Familia and then saw what Xanis was doing, he was just disappointed and really didn't give a crap about Xanis and his schemes. So that's why he freed Lily, because he does not like Xanis at all. And then the conversation between Hestia and Lily pretty much remains the same. The one thing that irks me is that they don't show Naza doing anything until she finally fires that arrow that has a wire to get Welf up to the balcony to save Lily. But they don't show Naza at all, like, participating in the battle before that. I do like that they finally animated Chigusa doing some stuff, though. Like, they show Chigusa actually taking someone out, so I'm happy she's getting some justice there. Also, originally, Xanis is actually watching the battle unfold, and that's when he spots Lily actually running up to where Soma is located. So he makes his way to where Lily is, and as Lily is climbing up to reach Soma's room, Xanis actually finds Lily beforehand, and he just starts kicking her around, and that, like, whole sequence continues until Lily reaches the top, and by that point, Xanis has been beating her up and kicking her around. But despite the fact that she's getting banged up by Xanis, she still makes it to the top to plead Soma to stop the fighting. Now, originally in the light novel, Soma is taking care of plants rather than stirring wine, but that's really not that big of a deal. It still illustrates the fact that what he cares about the most right now is just making his wine. However, once Lily does showcase her will to fight through Soma's wine, rather than throw like a whole keg of his wine out the window, he just throws an empty wine bottle. It proves that Soma is very startled by the fact that Lily is able to resist this effect, that he would even destroy some of his wine to catch everyone's attention. And that's the thing about Soma, like he originally made that Familia so people could help him create his wine, and he would give out the wine as rewards, and then he just kept getting more disappointed in his Familia when he saw what the wine was doing to them. But that's also something that as a god you should know, like this wine is super powerful, Soma. Of course not many people could resist this. So he is at fault for the situation, Soma Familia obviously, as well as Xanus of course. And even Hestia at the very end of this reprimands Soma. Like she basically tells Soma off, like, think about why Lily changed, why she was able to resist the effects of this wine, and what you should be doing for your Familia now. And back to that sequence where Xanus is about to attack Lily, and then Naza fires that arrow. Yay, more Naza. Fires that arrow to get that wire so Welf can traverse to the balcony and stop Xanus. The whole sequence lasted a bit longer. Like, Welf got to the top and he did not immediately just do away with Xanus. Like, they're both level 2, so Xanus actually did put up a bit of a fight. But eventually Welf did overpower him with his greatsword, and what he did was basically slash the blunt side of his blade against Xanus' face, and it splits his glasses in half and also leaves this huge red line across his face, and I wish we got to see that. Like, he makes a funny face here in the anime, but I really wish they did more for like a animated cutscene here for an actual fight between Welf and Xanus. Even though Xanus doesn't deserve that kind of love, that kind of animation, Welf, my boy, does. He deserves some love with animation. And hopefully what they're doing here is just saving all the impressive animated cuts and fight scenes for the next episode, because it will of course cover the war game. And one of the things I did not mention in the previous episode was, before Belle goes off to train with Tiona and Eyes, Hestia actually asked Belle for the Hestia knife. And basically they skip out that entire plot point here in the adaptation for episode 3, because originally Hestia was using the Hestia knife as basically collateral for Lily to convert into Soma Familia. Like, originally you hear at the very beginning of this episode that the price for Lily's freedom was 10 million Valis. And Hestia basically gives that knife to Soma in exchange for Lily's conversion, and she promises to pay Soma back when she gets that money for winning the war game. And one thing I really wanted to see that this episode didn't really illustrate was, after the group walks back from that raid on Soma Familia, meeting Hestia, Lily, Welf, Mikoto, Chikasa, Miak, and Naza, after they walk back from that, they arrive at this crossroads that splits into 3 different parts, and they basically all walk different sides of it, and that's like a nice foreshadowing, a nice build-up to the situation that happens later on in the episode, where they're splitting apart, but a member from each of those groups will end up going to Hestia Familia. So I thought that's like a beautiful thing to tie up together, but they didn't really do that. And the other thing that disappointed me was how quickly they went through the conversions. Like, there's a lot more substance, a lot more feelings behind those, but they just quickly plowed through them like they were nothing. Like, in the case of Mikoto's conversion, Take had a really tough time deciding whether or not to ask Mikoto, because he's thinking on who he should send to Hestia Familia to help out, because he wants to help Hestia, but he doesn't have the courage, the will to go ask Mikoto, because he believes Mikoto is the best choice to send to Hestia Familia, because Oka is the captain, and only Oka and Mikoto are level 2, who would provide any sort of help for Hestia Familia. And of course Mikoto goes to Take and is basically thinking the same thing he is, and ask him to convert her to Hestia Familia. And there's a lot of emotions behind that, because a conversion is not something you just easily do. Because one detail they skip out here in the anime is that after you do a conversion, you can't convert again for a whole year. So Mikoto will be in Hestia Familia for a whole year, and that's the promise that Take and Mikoto make to each other, that she'll come back after that year passes. But that's a very long time, and it's only been at most a few months since the beginning of DanMachi. And then regarding Welf's conversion, like, it's a very big deal, because he just got to level 2 and got that high smith skill, which allows him to ask Hephaestus to engrave the Hestia Familia logo onto his equipment, which makes it more valuable, because when you see the Familia logo on that equipment, it makes it way more eye-catching and valuable and would just increase Welf's popularity as a smith, and he's willing to throw all of that away for his friends, for Belle, for Hestia, for Lily, and it's a beautiful thing, and they just kind of skip out on the significance of that. And the other thing they don't really show is that Hephaestus gives Welf a parting gift, a red hammer, and they don't show that at all. And again, they're going through these conversions really fast in the anime when they're really impactful for the members that are involved. And of course, I said I would go back to it, and here we are with Hermes asking Ryu to help with the war game. And the reason that Ryu is able to do that is, like I said, she's part of Hestia Familia, and you saw in Volume 5, or the last few episodes in Season 1, she reveals her past, where her entire familia was annihilated, and she asked her goddess, Astrea, to leave Arario. So that leaves Ryu in a position to actually qualify for this war game, because she's technically from a familia outside of Arario. And the cool thing about Ryu is that she's level 4, so her being level 4, it's like, well, she's level 4, Hyacinthus is level 3, so they're in pretty good shape right now. And the one thing that disappoints me with this scene with Hermes and Ryu is that Hermes asked for Ryu's Familia logo to make it easier for him to fill out the paperwork for war games. And that's what I really wanted to see, because I don't think I've actually seen the logo for Hestia Familia, and me being the lover of Ryu that I am, I want to know everything about her. But I have to say the most disappointing cut in this episode is in regards to Belle training with Aiz and Tiona. Because in the anime it goes by really quick, but in the light novel it really illustrates how hard Belle has been working. Because Belle and Aiz have been training for 5 whole days, and they actually sleep and eat where they're training at. They haven't been in the city for 5 whole days. All Belle has been doing is training for the war game. And there's a piece of advice that Tiona gives to Belle here where she says, even though you're getting hit a lot, don't drink potions right away, otherwise you'll run out of them. And the advice that Aiz gives to Belle remains the same. You see him try to take advantage of the opening that Aiz gives him on purpose, but the anime does not really do a good job of showing you that Aiz is open, because it's like a split second and it's only a shot of her body. You don't even see her face, so you can't really see Aiz baiting Belle to attack her. And the biggest letdown in this episode for me is that Tiona actually tells Belle in the light novel that Hestia Familia has gained new members from Take Mikazuchi Familia, from Hephaestus Familia, and from Soma Familia. 3 members have transferred. And at this, Belle realizes who those 3 people are, and he starts crying tears of joy. And I'm crying with them when I'm reading the light novel, and they just don't show this at all. And it's such an important scene to me to illustrate, because during those 5 days, a lot of what Belle is worrying about is Lily being captured by Soma Familia. And it's not until this moment that he realizes that Hestia made due on her promise to save Lily, and also he got more Familia members, and he's just crying tears of joy because there are people out there that are going to help him fight in the war game, and that just reinvigorates him to train even harder for the remaining time he has with Aiz and Tiona. And then the final scene in this episode has Freya in it, saying that she was thinking about crushing Apollo, but she's really wanting to see how the war game plays. She wants to see Belle shine, so she's willing to let this war game happen. But the one thing they don't really show is that in the light novel, Otaro tells Freya that a certain item is ready that she ordered. And I'm not going to say what that is, because it's probably going to come up later, or maybe it won't, because they skipped the whole Hestia knife shenanigans in the previous episode, but maybe they'll skip this stuff in the next one. Who knows? I really hope they do a good job with episode 4, because it's the climax of this arc. It's likely the last episode to this arc unless they expand upon it more, and it'd be really impressive if they do that, because I really do hope they make the war game last as long as possible without it dragging out, because there are a lot of scenes in there I want to see done justice. And as I've been going over, there are sub-stories happening in the DanMachi mobile game, DanMachi Memoria Freeze, that tie into every episode. And in this sub-story, it's another original scene. It expands upon the upgrade that Hestia applies to Belle after his training with Tiona and Aiz. All of his stats are now double S, except for magic. He's still at a disadvantage because Hyacinthus is level 3, but it does bring Belle a lot closer to him in strength. Of the 3 episodes, I think this one was the weakest adaptation, simply because none of the scenes particularly stood out animation-wise. Like, the highlight of episode 1 was of course the dance between Aiz and Belle, and the highlight of episode 2 was the fight between Hyacinthus and Belle. And in here, there were fights that happened, but they're very short sequences. At least they animated Chigusa taking a guy out, like, I'll give them that. But again, they skimped out on the fight between Welf and Xanis, and I really do hope they're just saving all those good cuts for the climax of the war game. But again, one thing I do like about this episode is them giving us that original scene with Hestia and crew just planning out the attack on Soma Familia. In regards to what this episode covered, they covered the first 4 pages of the prologue in the light novel they skipped previously, as well as 4 pages with the confrontation between Lily and Xanis during the Apollo Familia raid. And then, of course, they went through page 142 and stopped at 193. And there are about 67 pages left to go in the book, so it definitely looks like next episode will be the last episode of the arc unless they choose to expand upon the content greatly. And again, with this kind of pacing, it really looks like Volume 7 might be 6 episodes. Then we have 2 episodes for something else, whether that's Volume 8, which is really a lot of side stories, so I think they could do Volume 8 in 2 episodes if they really wanted to. I don't think they should. Part of me wishes that Volume 8 becomes like an OVA series, or maybe it'll do 2 episodes here and then conclude it with an OVA. But that's really because if they do a season 3, which I really hope they do, because it's one of the best arcs in DanMachi. Volumes 9 through 11 is one big arc, and it's just such an amazing arc, especially for Belle's character. I think if you watch season 3, you'll just love Belle so much more if you don't already love him now. But the other thing that they can do if they're really doing Volume 6 and 4 episodes and Volume 7 with the same pacing in 6 is adapt the first story in episode Ryu because it actually takes place between Volume 6 and 7. But if they really were doing that, I would think they would have mentioned something by now, because Ryu is a rather popular character in DanMachi, and you would think they would say something about her involvement, like heavy involvement, in Season 2. If episode Ryu was being adapted partly. But again, I really do hope they do a good job and pull out all the stops for all the fight scenes that we will inevitably get in episode 4 of season 2, because it's the conclusion to War Game, one of my favorite volumes in the entire series. So please, JC staff, do your best. Anyway, that concludes my skip content and episode review for episode 3. If you liked what you saw here and want to see more videos like this, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Of course, follow me on Twitter and join my Discord. And as always, continue enjoying your time adventuring in Aurario and the dungeon. This is Lorne, your guild advisor, signing out.